I'm muted. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon. How are we?
Hi, friends.
Hey, gang. Doing pretty good. How about you, Andre?
I'm doing stellar.
Stellar. Nice.
Yes, it's
I like the
been.
enthusiasm. Now I feel bad about my pretty good thing. I feel like I could have
It's
jazzed
all
that up a
good.
little bit.
How about yourself, Scott?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Yeah, good to
All
see you
right.
both.
Have you replaced the Perrier with Red Bull yet?
Still going for the water.
All good, all good, all good.
I should get some
Folks,
more.
welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday. It's moments after 1 o'clock, and I do stress moments. And what are we going to do today? We are going to have our usual web page test live, and we're going to do a fantastic audit. And I do stress fantastic. Why? Well, we are going to play around with the brand new features that we unveiled. I was going to say unleashed, but that we unveiled yesterday to the jubilant audience. It was a bit of a surprise, but people have been enjoying it. Would you not say?
I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
And
been
honestly,
really fun
yeah.
to see the feedback streaming in, and also from the kinds of power users that tune into this show often, to hear some ideas about little tweaks they'd make to the way things are recommended based on their preference, and that'll definitely inform what we're doing in the future. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I mean, it's already been interesting, like Scott said, seeing like some of the different takes on some of the potentially suggestions, like situations where maybe they work, situations where maybe they don't work really, they don't work quite as well, or which we always knew was going to happen. And this is always going to be a bit of one of those things where we're kind of adjusting and learning, as we see these things applied at scale, like what does that as the impact, what other things are out there that, could be exposed. I know there were some good suggestions about going a little deeper on the network and all sorts of stuff we can do. But yeah, it's been awesome. And the feedback has been really, really good. And it seems like some people are having lots and lots of fun playing already. So
Yep.
it's good.
It's only been 24 hours, literally, like 1 to 1. 1 o'clock yesterday, 1 today. It's felt like a week. It's like, oh my God, there's so much stuff going on. It has been very eventful. And kudos to both of you, by the way. I know internally we were chatting away, and I was sort of expressing my praise, but both of you and the rest of the Eng team have been doing fantastic work. For anyone who doesn't know, there's a lot going on in the background, and you guys can't tell, but they both have their sleeves rolled up. But it's been fantastic to watch this amazing product, and we've been casually calling it game changer. I don't know if we could say it's casual anymore. We've been, I think, surprised by how well people have taken to the announcement and the product, and unsolicited praise coming left and right. So that's been great to see.
Yeah, it's been awesome to see people feeling that way. I mean, I know just many of the reasons that we built this were based on our own experience running these kinds of experiments ourselves, and how much time that took, and how hard it was to do them accurately, and all of that. Making that easier is pretty rewarding. It's fun for us to play with.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great too because, and I think this comment has come up a few times, the fact that we're going to empower folks with some, no code experimentation. That's come up quite a few times, and that's been great to see as people who are just potentially not, technical SEOs or, engineering directors, wink, wink, who will be able to make some of these changes and watch the results sort of come in sort of like this one click operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the different categories of roles of kinds of people who would be using this tool was really front of mind when we were building it. I think it's really common for business owners to know that their site has performance or usability or accessibility issues, and not necessarily know what to do about it. Even if they could run WebPageTest in the past, we weren't necessarily surfacing information that was friendly enough and clear enough to non-developer audiences. So this is a big change in that regard. Not only can a non-developer kind of user of WebPageTest get a good idea of what's wrong and what's causing problems that they can observe themselves, but also try to fix it and just see what happens to change it for the better. And then they could talk to their development team from there and say, looks like you just need to make this little change here. That's a big change from even a week ago for that particular
That's
person.
true, actually. Actually, it's a big change from 25 hours ago, literally. So it's having made the announcement 24 hours ago. Bad joke. But what we're going to do is get into the classic WebPageTest Live and auditing and whatnot. I know that you two have a great set of sort of conversations and audits and, showcases of some of the features that we unveiled yesterday. So what I'm going to do is see myself out this stream. I just want to give a shout out to Anthony, who's in the chat right now. Hello, Anthony, ye of podcast that we're going to be on soon. Good man right there. So, gentlemen, have yourself a great WebPageTest Live, and I'll be in the background when you need me.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andre. Hey, Tim.
Hey, man. It's been a bit since we've done one of these. Been a minute since we did one of these live audits.
Yeah, I haven't been on here in a while.
Yeah. No, I know. It's been. Yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be good. So we talked about a few different ones that we thought we might want to dive into.
Some audits, yeah.
Yeah, a few different sites.
Yeah. Do you wanna share away? Do you think everyone here has seen what we've launched just in general yet?
I feel like that's a good place to start. Is not assume that it's the case. So can fire up. Just jump right into a result and show it off in there, probably in the context. How about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So I'm gonna share. There it is. Maybe there it is. Maybe I forgot how to do this. Give me a second. Oh, yeah. Scott, could you share? I'll send you some links. It looks like Chrome is yelling at me for not having system preferences, which means I'm going to have to close the.
This happened to me yesterday. I had all my tabs ready, and then
I know I was so sad. I
quit.
had like some demo things here. We'll figure it out. It's good. It's good.
All right. Yes, I can absolutely share. Here we go.
This is actually what we're doing. We're trying to do this for suspense, like build up the tension and excitement there.
All right.
That's the goal.
How are we looking?
I mean, I can see your thing. There we go. Let's add that in. How about, hey? Sweet.
What can you see? You can see everything, right?
I can.
We're good? All right, cool. Yeah. I'm on the homepage now. I think most people who are tuned in have probably would recognize this. There's a little information here that's added, a little video promo vid that talks about what's launched this week. And most of that takes place on the test result pages. So I can dig into one of those. Wanted to get a, how about that one? Sure. So when you're on a result page, not a whole lot has changed as far as, this section down here. You get a view of the metric numbers in a high level view, but this section here is new, and this is a bit of a preview of a much larger new feature of the result pages, which is called opportunities and experiments. So they're kind of teased with a little summary on the test result page here. And you can start to get an idea of how the page is performing under a few categories. So in particular, is it quick? Is it usable? Is it resilient? And we've broken down a bunch of diagnostic tests that we run into one of those three categories. And I'll show you how those break down in the opportunities page. So for this particular test, I've done a test run on, I'll show you, it's called the metric times. If anyone has been tuned into our streams earlier yesterday and today, I showed this off a little bit, but it's sort of a unit test suite in that it's a fake news website that has a lot of bad practices built into it on purpose so that it fails every diagnostic that we run on our opportunities page. So lots of blocking resources, big JavaScript frameworks loaded just to render.
I was going to say, I think that was
text.
Until that happened, my favorite thing about this page was the dog. I mean, it's still up there. It's pretty close. But then my second favorite was when we realized we need more blocking JavaScript. And
yes.
So I think there was literally the ticket was like, let's add React so we can block.
Yeah. So we loaded React off a CDN, which already bad start. And then and then all we did with React was render this headline here. So the rest came from the server, but we just wanted to get something passing through there. So anyway, lots of things that are not very user friendly about this page, which works out well when we run it against our opportunities suite. You can see that all of these red alerts represent diagnostics that were run that resulted in opportunities that we discovered that could be improved depending on if you change your code through a tip that we might recommend, or actually try changing the code directly by running an experiment, which is the new, I would say, killer feature that comes with WebPageTest Pro. And you can try it out. I ran the test on this page in particular because the metric times is set up to be a bit of a sandbox for anyone to run tests, run experiments on, rather. All of the experiments are available if you're testing that particular site. So you can try all of these out as long as you have a free WebPageTest account. So once you're signed in, you can run them. And if you run a test on another site and you have a free account, we do allow one of these experiments to be free. So that's if we recommend the defer render blocking scripts experiment, then you can try that one out for free. And the rest of these are just part of the pro user plan. So the way it works, if you haven't used it yet, these are additive. So you can add them to your cart, so to speak. And all of these optimizations will be applied to the experiment run. And for each experiment run, we also do a control test run that goes through the same experiment running proxy, but doesn't apply any changes. And the reason we do that is to try to get a fair comparison between the experiment run and the control run, just because passing it through our environment tends to speed up a site just a little bit. It puts it on a global CDN, and little differences exist that would change the speed even from your original site. So we compare that to the experiment run to try to get an accurate comparison. And then let's see if maybe I have an experiment result recently that we can look at. This was just to give an overview of the general workflow. So I'm going to go to an experiment result here. And when you run an experiment, it ends up showing this page with the differences. And in this case, I ran 3 experiments. So I added 3 and 4. Sorry. Yeah. I'm working on my counting. Thanks, Tim.
It's okay.
In this case, you can see that the combination of those 4 and the way I ran those 4 ended up making the experiment slower than the control. And that's useful to know too, right? So in particular, if you're comparing the process of running these kind of experiments of optimizing things to doing this manually in the past, we would often do a great deal of work, spend a lot of time producing these experiments, which would sometimes lead us to learn that they weren't a change that was worth making to the site. But in the process, that took a lot of time too. So it's really useful to know when something's slower or if it's faster. You will see it here too in green. Just kind of varies based on how the experiment works out on a given site. So that's how the result pages work. And then from there, you can always go back and add different ones. And run them again. So it's sort of a continuous process.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that's like important, I think, to note about these two, right, is like, or the thing that's kind of fun about it, I guess, in case it's not apparent, is like the information that's surfaced here in the opportunities could technically be derived from WebPageTest data before. Like all of this information is there, which has actually made the building the opportunities and experiments kind of fun. Like there's a ridiculous amount of data there. This is just us trying to make it a little bit more obvious what's going on. Like remove the need to sort of always, I mean, you're always going to want to at some point need to go back to the waterfall and all the stuff that's there. That's important. It's there for a reason. But we're trying to make some of those insights a little bit more apparent and obvious here.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I was going to say, this was actually one of the, I did send over, Scott, a pair of links, but I see you've got one there. Google Flights is one of them. We could start there. Do you mind bumping the font size just a hair too? Somebody asked that in chat. Perfect.
Sure.
Thanks, man.
How's that? Yeah. So this is a test that we ran on Google Flights this morning. And just so we can clear about the site we're talking about here, this is their travel site for booking flights. It's a good one to run experiments against currently anyway, because they've got this large hero image, and we were noticing in some test runs that the largest contentful paint metric is reporting pretty slow. So how soon that hero image ends up painting to the page in a slow connection speed. So in this case, we're on 3G. It would obviously, arrive sooner if we were on a faster mobile connection. But this is the one I happen to test this time. So we can see if there are experiments that are recommended to speed that up. So I'm on the opportunities and experiments page for this test run. And we can see already that different opportunities are elevated, and some are actually resolved as not a problem. So in this case, this is a highly optimized site. They've already taken care of making sure that they're not blocking rendering with any of their JavaScript and CSS files. But we are noticing largest contentful paint time that's higher than 2.5 seconds. So in that case, we've got the particular image in question in this case that's causing that metric to be slow, and we have a couple of experiments that are recommended. In this case, we've got, we can preload the image, which is a link element that the test runner will add to the head of their site, causing the browser to fetch that image at a really high priority immediately. The second experiment that's recommended here is priority hint, and that's pretty cool because these are a feature that just landed in browsers very recently. Chromium browsers in particular still, right, Tim?
Yeah, so Chromium right now. So you got Edge
Yep.
and Chrome and all that kind of stuff. Brave,
yeah,
whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in this case, we're marking it as this will only make an improvement, only be noticed in Chromium browsers. It'll be ignored in others, so it's a safe recommendation in that regard. And then so I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to run one.
Nope. Yeah, while you're running that, just to give folks, and you can run it in chat for a second, like the preload and priority hint thing, because I think the distinction is kind of interesting now. Preload used to do this thing where it would jump to the front of the line. You used a preload, immediately that resource basically jumped the queue and came in at a really high priority above other resources in the page. That actually was like a bad thing. It turned out to be a thing where people would preload fonts or preload whatever, and suddenly that font would jump the queue over the actual critical CSS you needed to be able to display the page, or potential JavaScript that might have needed to be high priority. Pat Meenan actually fixed that fairly recently in Chrome. So the distinction between the two is kind of interesting, I think, because preload really helps with that discovery. Like if it's a resource that the page doesn't find early in, like early on, it has to, it finds it later on the page, or it's inserted dynamically, or it's a background image, something that takes it a bit to discover. Preload will let it be discovered right away there in the head of the page. Mm-hmm. It no longer actually impacts the loading priority, but that's where priority hint comes in, and that impacts the actual loading priority of the resource. So that doesn't actually change discovery. It gets discovered at the same time as it would have before. It's still in the source at whatever point in the source it was. But now, instead of fetching, maybe at a low priority initially, I think for images, until it knows what's in that viewport, we say, hey, load this high. And so right away, the browser is going to prioritize it, adjust it accordingly. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I find the distinction kind of interesting because they both play in slightly different ways for that potential optimization. So it's always interesting to see like which one is going to make the impact.
Yeah, I agree. And just for a little background on this, we can see that the experiment's running here. I bumped up the number of runs just to hope that we get fewer outlier runs and get a better median result. So the more test runs you run, the more likely we're able to have a really good, accurate comparison between the control and the experiment. And it'll use the median result for both to make that comparison. And that's kind of useful to know, because if you run an experiment that you're pretty sure, like in this case, we're pretty sure it will improve the LCP metric, for example. But if it comes back as a result that doesn't look like it made a big difference in that metric, it could mean that you just had some strange network conditions in some of the tests you run, because this is loading a live website. So you might want to bump up the number of runs or just rerun it and look at the individual test runs and see, okay, is the site behaving like it, like it should?
Yeah, that's a good call out. Yeah, whenever I'm doing like the optimizations, I like to bump the run count for the same reason. Hopefully smooth out some of the outliers.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when we used to do audits for clients, and 9 runs, I think, was kind of our standard,
Sure.
For being able to get a good median.
So this question coming in about what do we recommend for the LCP preload, fetch priority equals high, or both, is a good question. And it gets back to, so like, this is both, I think, why we keep the waterfall around for folks who want to dive into that level, but it's also why experiments can be pretty darn cool. So first off, if you're not sure, you can run both, or you can run 3. They're additive, as you pointed out, Scott, right? So you could really kick off, you're curious, like which one's going to impact my site more. Try the preload one, try the fetch priority, try them both paired and see what happens with all, in all 3 cases, and which one gives you the boost that you're kind of hoping for. We could also look at the waterfall and derive that like by looking at what's happening there. And I think that's still probably worth showing at some point here, just to kind of, help people understand like where that's coming from. But I think that's the beauty of the experiment too, is again, if you're not, you don't go reading around performance waterfalls for just the fun of it, right? And you're not sure like from there what to do with it. It's so fast to kick off 3 of those experiments right, next to each other and find out quickly which one is going to be the biggest bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So this experiment finished, and again, a lot of test runs, also 3G connection. So each of those runs took at least 10 seconds or maybe more, because of how long it takes to finish loading that page on 3G. So we were waiting a little while for all those runs to complete, but we have a pretty useful result. We were expecting to see a priority hint improve our LCP metric, and it's a half a second faster in this particular case. Usually it's closer to a second when I've run this experiment on 3G, so it varies a little bit, but I think that's a pretty significant result. You can see it in the timeline down here. This is in half-second increments, and you can compare them and see that, all right, I wanted my LCP image sooner, and it appears to have done that with a very easy change from a coding perspective. What we're doing is, adding that attribute on the image. And if you want to verify that the change was made, you can go into, so all of these test result navigation links go to the experiment run, and you can actually view it as you would any other test run. So if I want to dig into the details of what happened in that test run, I could go to its detail page. And what's kind of neat about this view is it has some custom metrics that were run in along with the test run. And one of those captures the rendered HTML. So you can see if the transform was applied. And look at that. You can see that it found this flights SVG, and it added fetch priority high, which is the priority hint that we needed to apply to that image. So if you're ever in doubt, about like whether or not it applied in a way you expected, you can look at this output if it happens to be something that's changed in the HTML, and find it there. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, and so this, this is one of those optimizations too. Like you mentioned this at the beginning, you ran it on 3G, right? So if you wanted to see, what happens with this in other scenarios, you could run this on cable. Certainly, we would expect that any benefit would be a lot lower. And that's helpful information too, I think, because one of the things when you're doing this optimization work is you often to be able to keep getting the priority, the budget and the headcount, everything else to continue to focus on performance, you have to be able to justify your results and show like what was the impact. And that can be tricky because, knowing where to look. So if you do a little bit of homework ahead of time with this, and you can say, okay, well, it looks like on fast connection speeds, this isn't going to do much for us. It's going to help those folks who have, if they're coming in on a spotty network or slower connection or whatever it happens to be, those folks are going to benefit. That also gives you some clues on where to look after it goes out, if you have RUM data, and how to mine that and, figure things out from there, which I think is nice. Actually, if you want to go back to that real quick, I thought I just wanted to show one more thing on that preload versus priority hint on the comparison page of your control and your after, just so that it was good luck. Going back. Nailed it. Yeah. So if you can go down to the actual waterfall. So I think just to show where, for folks who are curious about the under the hood part, if you, go all the way over to the experiment control. Perfect. Either one. Pick this. Either one is fine. So this is with the experiment applied. So in this case, request number 2, right, is our LCP thing. That's that flights 3 SVG. So we can see it kicking off really early, right away when the HTML comes back. And if we go back to the control run without the experiment applied.
So cool.
Yep. Request number 4. So now in this case, it's still requested pretty early, but it comes in after those blocking CSS and JavaScript, because those are given the higher priority on the network. So that's where this improvement happens, is jumping up that priority, getting it fetched right away instead of later on.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Okay,
that's cool. I like that. Should I do a create experiment?
Oh, sure. What do you want to do?
Want to do something useful or just something funny?
I mean, if we've got something useful in mind, fire away. The create experiment stuff is pretty cool. We haven't really talked about that at all yet.
Yeah, I'll scroll through these a little bit, just because we tend to just focus on that first defer JavaScript one for a lot of demos, but there are really so many in here that are really useful to try out. A lot of them are in conflict with each other, so you may not want to choose, for example, inline and async the same resource. Once it's inlined, this one won't find it. So they kind of work in order like that. But a lot of these can be applied in combination with each other, and they don't conflict. They can complement each other. Let's see. We did the LCP image. This one's pretty interesting. It's actually generated a little discussion in the issue tracker too, about what we should recommend in these cases. But lazy loading images can be helpful and harmful depending on how you implement it. One of the ways it can be harmful is if it's, for example, your hero image, if that's lazy loaded and it's in the main viewport, then it'll arrive later than ideal, right? So in that case, we would flag images that are in the critical viewport, which is the viewport that you see here. Depending on the browser that is run, it'll change the width and height. But in this case, it's saying, we noticed some images are in that viewport that are being lazy loaded. You might want to consider not doing that. And this experiment would allow you to remove those lazy loading attributes. But it also leaves it up to you. You may know best. You probably do know better than the tool in a lot of cases. So these are just, sort of observations that we noticed that you might consider changing about your page. The way fonts are loaded, if you're seeing fonts take a long time, custom fonts take a long time to display, there are a couple of recommendations around that. Changing their behavior so they load more procedural, self-hosting them, requesting them earlier. There are also experiments that make things potentially worse on purpose, and those are useful to use for diagnosing resilience issues. So for example, what happens if I cause my fonts to time out or hang indefinitely? Will that break, some expectation of our site? Are we using icons in fonts that have a really poor fallback, for example? So it's useful to know these things, even if they're not necessarily aiming for an improvement on performance necessarily.
Yeah, the font loading one in particular, I think is interesting. I know there's been some discussion too on Twitter. I mean, there's been debates about how to properly load fonts since the dawn of web fonts, probably. So it's interesting because there's different trade-offs. I don't think there is any sort of one perfect way to load them, because there's a lot of different variables right now in terms of, are they blocking display? Are they not blocking display? Are you preloading? If you're preloading, does that mean end up contending with, other network resources? Like, there's so many variables into what could potentially impact how the font loading works on your particular site. And I think that's why we're like, again, having a place to scratch pad that a little bit and play with that. Like, what happens if it does time out with this particular approach? What if, we did preload it? What happens there? Like, playing around with all those different variables very quickly is nice. The ability to iterate fast is so important to be able to find, that sort of ideal, meaningful optimization that's going to apply.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of these experiments just would have been prohibitively, a long time to perform. And in the past, you'd need to prioritize which ones you even want to try, because you know that it's, if you're working for a client, all of that is billable time, right? So just being able to do more is kind of, it's pretty awesome. We didn't get into layout shifts, but in this case, once again, metric times is flagging or being flagged for images that are delivered without width and height attributes. That's a pretty recent improvement that happened in browsers, where if you provide the width and height attributes on an image, it can instruct the browser on the aspect ratio of the image before it even loads it. So it can make room for it in a layout and not let it push content around as it's loading. In this case, we know, the tool knows the width and height of the images that are causing problems. And if you run this experiment, it will re-deliver the page with those width and height attributes added to the image tags. So you can see if it causes your CLS metric, one of the core web vital metrics, to go away or to go to 0 instead of 0.2 in this case. That's an awesome one. I like running that one. I saw that
nice
one.
Improvement too. It was always kind of interesting because I guess, like, I don't know, I've always been fascinated by the fact that once you can start measuring something that you couldn't measure before, or tools start to get better around something that didn't exist before, like how quickly that exposes issues that we never really paid attention to. And the timing on this was kind of interesting, right? Because like CLS came out before that, we knew things shifted around and people complained about it, but we had nothing to measure. Like, it just wasn't something that people paid attention to. Then CLS comes out, people start paying attention to the metric. Now, the work around aspect ratio was spearheaded by Jen Simmons, who I think, was she Apple at the time or Firefox at the time when that happened? I don't remember.
Yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, her work on it is amazing.
Yeah. So interestingly, it came from her, who was at a browser that did not support CLS, but it was one of those things that kind of got ignored until that happened.
And even if we didn't,
fascinating.
Even without a metric to measure it, it's a very obvious hindrance to using websites that we all experience. The page just shuffles around while it's loading, and it's a nightmare if you're reading an article and then it gets pushed down and you have to scroll and find where you were. So it's awesome that we have tools to make that better now. Further down, we have accessibility issues. We've been running accessibility, an accessibility suite against test results for a few months now, but not really exposing any of the information until this week that it finds. So this is great. We're running the Axe. What is it? Axe DevTools. Axe Tools.
Axe. Suite. Against the WCAG compliance guidelines. And this will be just a start, by the way. It's going to be, we definitely have a lot more that we want to do with the accessibility stuff. I know that you and I have talked for a while now about like trying to figure out some other key metrics that we could pull off there. And we also do things like one of the things I think we want to do is, we can capture the accessibility tree And it would be nice to be able to display, like, give everybody kind of a clickable, way to kind of parse through that accessibility tree and see exactly what's in there. So there's other things we have coming. So I just wanted to make it known, like, we're pretty pumped about the accessibility stuff now getting rolled out on a WebPageTest, and we've got pretty good ideas for where we can take some of it. So
yeah. So far, we expose these findings, but we're not really offering experiments for accessibility issues yet. So I know some pretty great people in the accessibility field are looking at this tool already this morning and pretty excited about coming up with custom experiments that they could recommend to us that might be relevant for running and offering accessibility experiments. So that's pretty cool. So I got a little distracted, but I was on my way to this section at the bottom here called Create Experiments, and this is collapsed by default. It's a bit of a Power Tools section, but it's a big section. There's a lot in here. And what it does is sort of opposite of everything above it in the page, whereas everything up here, all of the experiments are recommended in a sort of reactive context. We see a bottleneck and we recommend something that might fix that bottleneck. But down here, we're just sort of opening up the tool for custom use. So you can change the page in ways that we wouldn't even know to recommend to you because you know it better than we do. Or perhaps you want to test something that you're planning to add to your site soon, and you want to know the impact on your performance if you were to add that. For example, a chatbot or a reviews widget or something like that usually comes in the form of a script tag that you put into your source. Someone on a marketing team who knows they need to add that soon could open up a test result and try it out here. They could add, well, in this case, I was testing it with just some arbitrary style tags.
Sure.
But in this rule here, I can just add any old HTML right to the end of the head element, and it'll do that in the test result. So in this case, if I were to run, I'll just run this test. It'll make everything have a background of red. So you can just sort of get a sense of the impact of it. Of course, that's not relevant to performance testing, but it shows you the power of what it's offering. So I'm going to kick that off in a new window. There we go. That'll be loading over here. We can go through a couple of other ones here. There's text find and replace. This might be useful if you have some transformation on the HTML that you want to make that isn't easy to do with the ones with the other experiments we offer up here. It even it supports regular expressions and all that, so pretty powerful. And then further down, we have all of the experiments that are recommended up top in very prescribed ways, but just open-ended, and you can pass whatever you'd like into these and add more. An interesting sort of way that these run is that a lot of them will look for whatever you pass in these fields. They'll look for those values in the page to be able to apply a change to it. So this is not going to add a script tag that doesn't exist in the page already, but it will add a defer attribute to any scripts that have a source of containing MyScript.js. And that goes for a lot of these. So like you could make them asynchronous instead of deferring them. You could add aspect ratios, and some of these come with a little configuration. So again, this is more of the advanced tooling section. We might, I hope actually, we find ways to make this a little more user-friendly in the future, but some of these come with syntax recommendations. So like, since we're offering the ability to add width and height to any old image in the page by its source, you're going to need to provide the width and height in that case. So there's some special syntax you use for that here. Let's see, inlining files. You can inline a CSS or a JavaScript file, and it'll actually fetch it and dump it right into the HTML content, preventing that external request, which is a nice performance pattern, especially for small files that are blocking rendering. Preloading, removing preloads, pre-connecting to domains that are used later in the page, for example. Lazy loading, removing lazy loading, minifying, adding priority hints, removing them, font display changes, and lastly, some of the options that WebPageTest offers on the homepage already, which I could show here under the advanced section. We're also offering in alongside experiments, because sometimes it's useful to run an experiment and maybe block or single point of failure a response or two. So you get those in addition. Oh, and while I'm here, bulk testing is also something we added this week, right, Tim?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to, this for the folks who want to go just intense, like fire off a bunch of tests with the same settings against a bunch of URLs, either listing them out here, or you can take a CSV of the URLs and it'll kick off a bunch of tests all at once for whatever. So like I tend to use it for, if I want to fire off some competitive testing, for example, just hypothetically speaking, if I wanted to see, how timcadlick.com loads compared to scottgel.com, I might fire the URLs in here and start
just your nightly run.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but it's useful for kicking off a bunch at once. These tests will get going, and then once they're started, you'll be able to, kick through and see the results for them there.
Yeah, nice.
I was just thinking.
Bulk testing.
Yeah,
I
was just thinking, if you don't mind, just for fun.
Oh, look at that.
What's that? Nice.
No,
this was injecting this style one.
Yeah, this was an example of injecting some arbitrary HTML. In this case, just to show the power of the tool, this added a style tag at the end of the head. And inside that style tag, it had a rule that made the background of everything red. Again, maybe not the most useful or useful at all experiment to run, but it really shows just how much power you have in this thing. You can do a lot. I mean, adding a style tag to the end of the head could be really useful if you wanted to combine, say, font display swap experiment with some typography CSS to make sure that the size, the height of the two fonts, the fallback font and the custom font, are the same. So you could apply those in combination and make sure you don't get a reflow when the fallback font is showing before the custom font loads. So there's just so much. I think we've been talking about all these ideas for blog posts about experiments and custom experiments we can run with this.
There's also there's a couple things I'm thinking of that like Carrie Roberts has a CSS diagnostic CSS file for exposing all sorts of anti-patterns, right? Like you can inject that in if you really wanted to and just get the visual of what's going on there. Or I know he also built that slow files. You see him experimenting a lot with this slow file service where you can arbitrarily have scripts or CSS that takes X amount of seconds to load. You can inject those in if you wanted to get really scientific and start playing around with what happens in our situation if we're, if a blocking script kicks in here or something. I don't know. I feel like it'll be really interesting to see what people use the custom experiments for, because it really is just like an open playground.
Yeah, fun stuff. Did you want me to pull up anything else while I'm here?
Well, how are we doing here on time here? Were we supposed to be kind of?
Yeah, it looks like we're past 2. So
rescheduling, yeah. So maybe we could answer a couple of the questions that I saw floating around.
Yeah. All right.
First.
Yeah.
So one from Eric. Hey, Eric. Whoa, got some Inception going on there. That was fun. So for the significant portion of HTML recommendation will be consideration be added for generated HTML that's hidden by default. Specifically, his use cases were off-screen mobile nav and SVG icons. That's pretty smart. Potentially, we could look at doing something like that at some point. Right now, I think we're basically just comparing the diff of the generated HTML before and after and seeing what's, how much
Yeah.
it achieved. But
right.
it's an
Yeah. I
interesting
mean,
case.
I think, if you're using the tool frequently, you'll be seeing recommendations change a lot in the coming weeks because, it was sort of the nature of launching this thing and getting it out there that we need to see a lot of tests thrown at it. Different sites are going to expose different recommendations, and it'll allow us to tweak the way that we respond to different conditions. So I think that rule in particular is the aim of it is to try to identify sites that are overly dependent on client-side rendering. And it's a difficult one to figure out for a threshold because it's not just the size of the generated DOM that matters in that case. Like it could be only 2 or 3 kilobytes that are generated, but that's the whole page and it's actually useful. That can be a lot of HTML. So we went with percent as one of the leading differences, what percentage of the page. And I think if it's over, I think it's over 5% or something like that, then we just let you know about it. But again, this is one of those things where we really want to, emphasize that it's not supposed to be a grade. Like run this tool. We're not going to give you a badge to put on your site that says you're all green on web page test opportunities. It's there to help you find things that could be an issue and maybe aren't. You know best. So or to that kind of a two-part answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. And I think that's what we're kind of after is like that continuous improvement, which is why, we are looking at, like you said, all sorts of, like, we've got thresholds on things, but we're trying to basically expose a bunch of these potential opportunities, no matter what we're seeing otherwise, just because like tested in a different scenario and that thing that doesn't seem to impact anything right now on your cable connection in Chrome from the US might actually be a huge difference maker if you're testing, I don't know, on Firefox, or if you're testing on an Android device, or if you're testing from a different country or a slower connection speed. Like, that's why it's always going to be a little tough for us, and why we probably don't want to, necessarily hide a bunch of stuff, even if they look like they might be okay in one situation, just because we want to encourage folks to keep testing in different situations, different variations, and see what happens there. So
yeah. We've also been pretty intentional about making the thresholds somewhat friendly. So if you have an incredibly fast site, it might not be picking up ways to make it even incredibly faster. And that's kind of okay. Like if you're already that fast, you probably know how to use WebPageTest to dig in and find ways that you can optimize it further. And maybe we'll find ways to recommend you to do that too. But we also wanted to make it a little forgiving and rewarding to sites that I think really need help the most. And those tend to be the sites that all of us use every day, sites that are in the top 10 or whatever, news sites, things like that are just really hard to make fast. So I think we've been running a lot of those through the tool to make sure that recommendations are relevant and hopefully helpful, move the needle.
Yeah, exactly. So the best, I know there's a couple questions around other metrics or specifically surfacing different things. The biggest thing I can say there is, please, have a look at our GitHub repo, get file issues. That's the best way to get stuff in front of us. It also lets us, the other big benefit of that versus other places is that then folks can pile in on it too. And things that are really important, or to the community or to a bunch of people start to really surface up. But that's how we used to prioritize a lot of the work. And we know like experiments and opportunities we are pumped about, and we are also not done with. So there's a lot of stuff we want to do. There's a lot of stuff we're hearing folks want to do. There are some great ideas that have come out already. So keep those coming because we are watching that super, super close.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of the planning for what goes into Pro is going to take place in the open now.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have all sorts of cool ideas that we're going to move over to the tracker. I know, we talked about traceroute being a bigger factor in resilience, and maybe we just include some trace route runs and see how your time to first byte looks around the world. Things like that. I'm really excited to
me too.
keep rolling these out.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this is where the fun starts. So yeah. Henri, you're muted.
Hey, Henri.
Or you're quiet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. You look great, though.
Well, thank you. Speaking of fun, that was a great session, gentlemen. Our first and inaugural WebPageTest Live with Ops and X. No, X. Is that what we're going to call OpEx? I don't know. There are too many syllables, opportunities and experiments. It's too much. But either way, thank you for your time. Thank you for your valuable time, especially in a moment of a launch where we know exactly where you're going right now after we close this stream. Heads down, trying to get some things done. So we do appreciate your time. For everyone out there, if you've been on Mars, welcome back. We just launched Opportunities and Experiments yesterday. It's been 24 hours, 25 now, actually. And if you're not familiar with it, go check out webpagetest.org. You'll see some changes. We also had a blog post. Let me see if I could find it here. I'll post it on Twitter, or you can find it on Twitter. I think we pinned it to our WebPageTest Twitter account, which there we go. All right. A little banner override there. That was pretty awesome.
Sorry, I was trying to help you out, buddy.
I didn't know that could happen. That was pretty cool. But definitely give us a follow at Real WebPageTest on Twitter. Obviously, you can follow Scott at Scott Gel on Twitter, and of course, Mr. Cadlick. You can find him on Twitter as well. But that being said, I do want to remind people of a few things. We are going to follow this live up with one Tuesday, and it's going to be Tuesday morning at 8:30. And we're going to be playing around with these a bit more. We're attempting to have some friendlier hours for APAC and other territories like India, where we have a lot of users of WebPageTest. So that's going to be Tuesday morning at 8:30. We'll announce it on a Twitter channel. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we also have a page where we're going to be posting the majority of our events, whether we're streaming or making some appearances somewhere. We're getting a lot of requests now for people who want us on their podcasts and whatnot. So let us know through Twitter if you have a guest slot for us, because we'll be happy to come by and talk about all the big features that we've had going on the last little while. So that being said, I think that's it, gentlemen. Am I missing something?
No, that was great. I noticed a few more questions came in,
okay.
So maybe we can address them
by all means.
afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Also, today's the 2nd? Mr. Gel, you'll be speaking next week in person, right?
Yeah, there's a little event at Catchpoint headquarters in Manhattan on 7th, I think.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna. I think you tweeted out the info for that. We'll put it out there again for people who are in New York and who'd like to attend and see some of this in person.
It's filling up. I'm not sure what the cap is, but I think there's still a little room.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
That being said, folks, thank you very much. Once again, check the schedule. Our next appearance should be Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m. And I think that's like 2:30, like CEST, something like that, and 6 o'clock India time. That's for sure. 6 p.m. that is. So that being said, folks, thank you very much. Tim, Scott, merci again, and we'll catch everyone soon.
Thanks, gang. Yep. Bye.
Bye.